Like, is it acceptable for a politician to, to use cocaine? Is it acceptable for a politician to visit a brothel? Is it acceptable for a politician to open a company in an offshore jurisdiction? Dr. George Hyzler, Malta's new and first ever commissioner for standards in public life. There's already quite a lot of expectations about your new role. Can you just inform the public what your role actually entails?
Okay, so the Commissioner for Standards in Public Life, which is a position that is similar to positions in other countries, is, so to speak, the parliamentary watchdog, in the sense that there are a number of responsibilities, including responsibilities with regards to breach of ethics by parliamentarians. That includes ministers, parliamentary secretaries, parliamentary assistants, as well as persons in positions of trust that do not form part of the civil service. Now, my responsibility, therefore, is to investigate, to scrutinize the conduct of parliamentarians and these people. There are a number of other related duties as regards, for instance, the examination of the declaration of assets of these persons. I am also expected to advise upon request upon conduct that these persons may have a query about, in which case if I say it's okay, then it's okay, and then I won't be able to investigate. I'm expected to draft or expand upon the Code of Ethics and issue guidelines. That would be mainly the main areas of concern.
So I'm going to take some very clear-cut examples. I'm not going to refer to specific cases, I know you can't comment on them, but specific examples. Like, is it acceptable for a politician to, to use cocaine or other drugs?
Of course not.
Not acceptable. Is it acceptable for a politician to visit a brothel?
Let me tell you, as far as I'm concerned, it should not be considered acceptable. But we have to be careful now where to draw the line between private life and public life. Obviously, people in public life are exposing themselves to greater scrutiny than private individuals. So people who enter public life should be prepared to face public scrutiny. Now, if somebody wants to drink and goes out there and say, look, I don't care what everybody says, I am a heavy drinker and I don't care if I get drunk every day. Now, is it something we should be discussing? Let's talk about it and see. I'm using drink as an example, obviously, because it hasn't been put in the media.
It's essentially something that is legal, but that is ethically questionable.
Yes, I mean, is it correct? Does it affect your duties as a representative of the people?
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you think? Do you think that a minister should be allowed, for example, to go out, or any politician to go out drinking and get completely sloshed in front of other people?
I really should. I don't think we should be discussing particular instances, because each case would have its own circumstances. My training as a lawyer basically tells me treat each case on its own and see what the circumstances are. Mm-hmm. I mean, now if we're going to stick to this as an example, I mean, it's one thing if somebody is a habitual drinker who cannot perform his duties. Mm-hmm. It's another thing if somebody maybe is at a party and he drank a bit too much at one part. I mean, let's not go there.
What about going to a brothel? You hadn't answered that.
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think it's correct to go to a brothel, but I mean, in fact, when a minister was accused of going to a brothel, he reacted by saying it is not true and started court cases again, to prove that. So what I mean is, it seems, and I would tend to agree, that it is not correct, especially if you're doing public work, or I mean, you're on parliamentary duty.
Yeah. Is it acceptable for a politician to open a company in an offshore jurisdiction?
It depends what you talk about. Anything that breaches the law is not acceptable. So if it is not legal to have offshore accounts, because that is a way of hiding money, in other words, you're avoiding tax, which is then obviously it is not correct.
But it is legal. Like, it is legal to have companies in places like Panama, for example. It doesn't. That's the whole point. Is not whether it is legal, but whether it is ethically questionable because of the way.
Anything that is not legal cannot be ethical.
Yeah.
Ethics goes beyond law. So when we talk about breach of ethics, we are going beyond what is strictly legal, because strictly legal, of course, goes against ethics. So one has to see what are the circumstances and why that's happened. So it is very difficult to make a blanket statement and say it is not ethical to open offshore accounts. I don't think I can say that, or I would say that. But you'd have to see why and what are the circumstances. Obviously, you'd have to ask for explanations.
Is it acceptable for a politician to be at a party or at an event where there are also notorious criminals in attendance?
Tim, you're going to specific examples.
No, it's not a specific. It's not a specific. It is a case. So because there was a debate about this recently, if a politician is at a party and there happens to be a couple of criminals there, should the politician face some sort of scrutiny for being in the presence of these people?
Let's put it this way. Politicians are close to the people, and as a rule, they do not choose the company they would be with. In other words, it is one thing attending a public function where you don't know who the people are. It's another thing being invited by somebody who's known to be a criminal, for instance. So obviously, I would think, and this, don't forget, I have to make all the caveats possible. I mean, case-by-case basis and see what the circumstances are. But I think as a general rule, if a politician happens to be at an event where there are people of certain bad reputation, I think you can't really do much about it. On the other hand, if a politician is accepting an invitation by somebody or by a group of people who are known to be criminals, I think it would be wrong. I mean, for instance, if I were to receive an invitation from, a criminal gang, assuming that they would sign that way, of course I should not accept it. But if I go to a wedding reception, somebody is invited to his daughter's wedding, and there happen to be other people who are not savoury characters, I mean, it is difficult to draw that line. Don't forget, politicians, by definition, represent the people. You have to see on a case-by-case basis. I mean, my general advice would be avoid those situations.
But obviously, sometimes they're unavoidable.
Sometimes you find yourselves there.
Is it acceptable for a politician to have a member of his or her staff who is implicated in some sort of corrupt or criminal activity? Should that politician then be made to show the responsibility for the actions of their employee?
There is such a thing as political responsibility. So basically, when a politician endorses his employees, he does not do anything about it, that could be interpreted as an endorsement and could give rise to questions. As a general rule, I would strongly suggest that members of the staff of ministers and parliament secretaries should be clean. I mean, if we want to raise the standards of our ministries, if we want to raise the standards of parliament and the way people look at politicians, I think it's in the interest of the politicians themselves to distance themselves from anybody who has a criminal record, anybody who could put the office in disrepute.
And if a minister or a parliamentary secretary hears or gets a whiff of some sort of suspicion of criminal activity or corrupt activity by one of his employees and doesn't tell the police about it, is that something that's completely unacceptable?
Tim, I need time to adjust from being a lawyer to this role, because obviously my training as a lawyer tells me everybody is innocent until proven guilty. Yeah. And so somebody should not be condemned before he's... At the same time, in this role, my my tendency would be to say, if there is any hint of wrongdoing, distance yourself. Distance yourself. It's hard luck. Get another job, but please don't stay in public life.